of a few procedures to help you navigate this hybrid format. First, consistent with regulations, the committee will keep microphones muted to limit background noise. Members joining virtually are responsible for unmuting themselves when they seek recognition or when recognized for their 5 minutes. Committee staff will mute members only in the event of inadvertent background noise. Second, when members are present in the proceeding via WebEx, they must have their cameras on. If you need to step away and attend another proceeding, please turn your camera and audio off rather than logging out of the platform. Finally, we will dispense with our practice of observing the Gibbons rule and instead go in order of seniority for questioning, alternating between majority and minority, beginning with members of the Oversight Committee. I thank you all for your continued patience as we navigate these procedures to continue serving our country together in this great time of need. And with that, I will now turn to the important topic of today's hearing with IRS Commissioner Rettig on the 2022 filing season. And now I shall deliver my opening statement. Welcome, everybody. The Subcommittee on Oversight meets today to review the 2022 tax return filing season and the overall operations of the Internal Revenue Service. I would now like to welcome our witness, IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig. Chairman Pascrell regrets that he could not attend today, and he asked me to serve as chair this morning. He wanted the subcommittee to hold this hearing today because it is essential that we ensure the IRS makes this a successful tax season for all taxpayers. He has submitted a statement for the record, and without objection, it is entered into that record. So, Mr. Rettig, thank you so much for appearing today. We know that this is a very busy time for you and the IRS employees, so we are especially appreciative that you were able to join us this morning. And we are very grateful for the dedicated service of the IRS employees. We are particularly interested in receiving an update on the ongoing tax season, including any recommendations you have for taxpayers or practitioners as we near the April 18th filing deadline. The IRS has warned that there would be enormous challenges this filing season due to an unprecedented backlog of millions of unprocessed tax returns. Each return represents an individual, a family, a business desperately awaiting needed refunds from last year. We look forward to hearing from the Commissioner on what the IRS has done so far this year to address the backlog and what additional tools the IRS needs from Congress. Importantly, we must assist our constituents who have been waiting months for much-needed refunds, including individuals claiming the rebate recovery credit and small businesses claiming the employee retention credits. I recently held an event with our local taxpayer advocate, and it has been one of the highest reviewed events of the pandemic, which just goes to show how many people are looking for information and relief during this filing season. And it's not just credits and refunds. My constituent, Brent Kennedy, has been denied an increase on his SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL, because IRS has not corrected his business return from 2019. It also took months to post his returns from 2020, and the IRS has not corrected his business return. This may not have happened at all had my office, not intervened. Now his business, which is Inspire Home Construction, is in danger of closing because of the backlog and an IRS issue that keeps corrected returns from being posted so that the SBA can see them. As a former employee and member, actually as a former member of California's elected state tax board, I know the importance of timely, accessible service and assistance in ensuring fair tax administration. We cannot be complacent with a level of service in which only 1 in 10 taxpayers calling the IRS is able to reach an IRS customer service representative for tax law and account answers. I recognize that the IRS received an unprecedented number of phone calls last year, nearly 300 million. And I would like to hear from the Commissioner what lessons the IRS learned in applying this filing season. That includes expanding the use of callback technology, and I look forward to hearing what is being done to expand the availability of that feature. Further, the tax laws provide the IRS with administrative authority to address certain situations that develop during the filing season, which may be unfair to taxpayers. I have consistently advocated for various tax penalty relief as a matter of fairness, particularly as taxpayers continue to face COVID-related challenges in filing their taxes. I look forward to hearing what administrative relief and actions are currently under consideration by the IRS in response to taxpayer difficulties and the backlog. Today's hearing is also an opportunity to learn how current funding levels are impacting IRS staffing, programs, and most importantly, taxpayers and tax administration. A decade of underfunding by those who do not value fair and full tax administration has harmed the IRS and countless taxpayers. These impacts include a tax gap of up to $1 trillion a year, a reliance on correspondence audits of low-income taxpayers, the worst telephone services in the history of the agency, and antiquated technology that does not allow for the scanning of returns, secure email contact with taxpayers, and agency preparedness for now or the future. Thanks to the bipartisan omnibus that President Biden signed into law this week, the IRS has received an increase in funding of nearly 6%. That is, in addition to funding from pandemic-related legislation for information technology. However, we all know that this is not enough, which is why the House-passed reconciliation bill included long-term sustained funding of $80 billion. I look forward to discussing how we can make this tax season successful, and I now yield 5 minutes to the ranking member, Mr. Rice, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also want to thank Chairman Pascrell for holding this hearing today. Thank you to Commissioner Rettig for being here and being so available to us. And before I begin, I want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of IRS employees that have worked very hard and have worked overtime in many cases during this pandemic. We've had many policy debates here and many concerns about management decisions at the IRS. That's our job, oversight. But your work is important and it's not easy. So we say thank you for it. Now, this tax return backlog crisis began with pandemic closures in March 2020 that impacted all of society. The IRS was closed for months due to the virus, and so some slowdown would be expected. While the electronically filed tax returns could be processed remotely, paper returns and mail piled up at the IRS facilities with no one there to open them. I recognize that during the pandemic, Congress assigned the IRS significant new responsibilities, such as sending economic impact payments and advanced child tax credit payments to millions of Americans. There is no doubt that the pandemic created a significant challenge for the IRS, just as it did for American families and businesses. The IRS has certainly had successes along the way, developing a process for sending out economic impact payments to millions of Americans with almost no notice, and executing those payments so promptly was clearly one such success. But not all actions taken at the IRS have been successful during the pandemic. Republican members of this committee have been sounding an alarm about the backlog crisis for well over a year now. And it truly is a crisis. Tens of millions of unprocessed tax returns from last year await processing. That represents refunds due to individuals and to businesses, and it significantly affects households and the operation of those businesses. When President Biden took office, the return backlog and customer service at the IRS were already at crisis levels. Customer service levels have been low at the IRS for decades, but things got much worse as the pandemic dragged on. The agency was receiving millions more calls than in previous years, and phone call answer rates fell to even lower levels. This information was known when President Biden took office. But President Biden didn't propose a plan to resolve the backlog and fix the customer service crisis at the agency. Instead, he proposed doubling the size of the IRS by hiring 87,000 new agents to conduct tax enforcement, not process the backlog or provide customer service to taxpayers. As part of that plan, the Biden administration also wanted local banks to report details of nearly every American's bank account to the IRS in a massive surveillance effort. So far, these bad ideas have been blocked from becoming law, thank goodness. But unfortunately, we know the administration is still pursuing them. When it comes to the IRS, the Biden administration has its priorities misguided. The idea that we would double the size of the IRS by focusing on enforcement without first fixing the agency's ability to provide basic services to everyday Americans is laughable. It wasn't long ago that Republicans and Democrats on this committee came together to draft and pass the Taxpayer First Act. Part of the purpose of that bill was to reform the IRS and to make it work better for taxpayers, to put taxpayer service at the heart of the agency's mission. The Biden administration's plan would undo that work and turn the agency into an aggressive enforcement agency that is adverse to taxpayers rather than one that serves taxpayers. When it comes to long-term vision of the IRS, we need to come together in a bipartisan way to fix the customer service problems and modernize IRS technology. Since I've been on this committee for 6 years now, I've consistently heard about the fact that we're using computers that were built in the 1980s, some running COBOL programs that only one person in the IRS knows how to operate and to program, and when that person retires or passes on, the IRS is stuck. It is absurd that it has gone on for 40 years now with ancient technology, and we can't seem to get it modernized. We have thrown money at this problem before, and if we had solved this problem in modernizing technology, I don't believe we would be facing the issues with the backlog that we have today. We can do it. There are members on both sides of the aisle that are dedicated to working on it, but first, we need the IRS's help. They need to tell us what needs to be done, and they need to convince us that they can actually do it, because we funded it before and it didn't get done. And so people have great doubts as to whether it will be done if we throw money at it again. So we need a cost estimate, we need to know what needs to be done, and we need to know how it's going to be done. Now let me transition back to the short term. That's the long-term solution. More technology is a long-term solution. Let's go back to the short-term problems we're facing. Just last week, the IRS and Treasury put out what they called an aggressive plan to end pandemic inventory backlog this year. That would be an aggressive plan. I'm not sure that it's possible that we can completely do away with the backlog this year. That plan highlights several initiatives that we've heard about previously, combined with a few new initiatives. Commissioner Rettig, while I wish this aggressive approach had been implemented a year ago, I'm very happy to see the agency has put put together a serious plan that matches the seriousness of the problem. I want to highlight a couple of the key points from the plan and how we got here. In January of this year, we learned that the IRS was sitting on over $1 billion that it received in early 2021, while at the same time arguing it needed additional funding to deal with the backlog. I urged the IRS multiple times in January and February to use those funds to address the backlog. It appears the agency may now be choosing to use those dollars to hire 5,000 workers dedicated to working through the backlog this year. After our calls for drastic action, the IRS announced it would create a surge teams to address the backlog. I understand this involves temporarily moving IRS employees from other parts of the agency over to submissions processing to help get through the backlog. That strikes me as a good idea given the scope of the problem, and I'd like to hear more from you, Commissioner Rettig, about how that process will work. I also noticed in your plan that you're evaluating options for pursuing additional contractor assistance. I'd like to hear more from you on that as well. Finally, you have a number of items in the plan regarding communication with taxpayers. I'm almost through, Mrs. Chairman. I want to know from you what you're going to do in the short term to help taxpayers who are contacting the IRS actually get the answers they need. This problem is massive, and the inability to contact the agency feeds the ongoing problem. Thank you for your aggressive plan, Commissioner Rettig, and I look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Without objection, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. Without objection, I would like to enter a statement from Mr. Bradley Schneider, who was unable to attend this hearing. Now, we will turn to our witness, Commissioner Rettig, who has joined us here in person to discuss this very important issue. Your statement will be made a part of the record in its entirety. I would ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes or less. To help you with that time, please keep an eye on the clock. If you go over your time, I will notify you with a tap of my gavel. Commissioner Rettig, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Chu, Ranking Member Rice, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the filing season and IRS operations. Before I continue with my opening statement, I need to address something personal, which is this may be my last time testifying in front of this committee. My statutory term expires November 12th of this year, but every single time that I've testified up on the Hill, I have had the extreme privilege of being accompanied by the same person who is sitting behind me. Ms. Diane Grant has been with the IRS more than 50 years, that I'm with Diane every single day, and that if folks think that a commissioner comes in and makes decisions, I want you to know how much I value Ms. Diane Grant, both as a person, as a colleague, as a friend, as a tax expert, and an IRS experience expert. And I think in many ways, Diane epitomizes the IRS employee. She is all that. She's also extremely humble, and I'm going to hear about this on the way back, but thank you for affording me the opportunity because we have some truly spectacular employees. As you know, the fiscal 21 gross receipts for the Internal Revenue Service were approximately $4.1 trillion, which represents about 96% of the gross revenue of the United States of America. A successful, fully functioning IRS is important to the continued success of the country. The government does not build bridges, education, and things in the military context. Those are built with funds, 96% of which flow through the Internal Revenue Service. Funding the Internal Revenue Service appropriately is critical to the success of the country. The questions you're going to ask me today, I'm fully aware, in large part, you're going to hear me talk about funding shortfalls in many, many different parts of the agency. I came on board almost 4 years ago, October 1, 2018, knew a lot about the Internal Revenue Service, have obviously learned a lot about the Internal Revenue Service. And I might encourage you to invite me back when I'm no longer wearing the collar of a commissioner for an additional discussion, whether that's one-on-one or in a committee hearing. I'm not the shyest person on the world, but I am representing an agency that I care deeply about, and that's why I came to this agency, which is really for the people of the Internal Revenue Service, the people of this country, members of Congress, to try to make it better. And as similar to some of you, I had 36 years practice interacting with the Internal Revenue Service on the outside, and I could not be more proud of my term as commissioner. The IRS, and when I say IRS, I'm saying the IRS employees, have been at the forefront of every issue during the pandemic of the last 2+ years. The IRS employees have performed spectacularly well, delivering over $1.5 trillion during a pandemic, 3 rounds of economic impact payments, 2 rounds of Form 1040 refunds, and then an additional 6, and in some cases 7, advanced child tax credit payments during the last half of last year, totaling an additional $93 billion. This is for people who I sent home in March of 2020 concerned about their health and safety, and I think I'm correct in saying we shut down the Internal Revenue Service at the front end, maybe before any other federal agency, fully aware that in March and April of 2020, one of our primary responsibilities is to the people in this country and to issue refundable credits, which are the difference between a food bank and food on the table, the difference between, rent and no rent. So we took that responsibility seriously. We had to get back into operation as quickly as possible. Our processing centers came back in June 6, 8, and 11, our 3 principal processing centers, to process those returns. But Chairwoman Chu, as you indicated, the electronically filed returns throughout this period of time were continuing for eligible taxpayers filing an accurate return requesting a direct deposit, continued to receive their refunds by deposit in about 21 days. The issue has always been for the Internal Revenue Service paper, pre-pandemic and during the pandemic. In fiscal 21, we received over 17 million tax returns in paper. Congress led us into changing and encouraging an electronic filing scenario that we are currently, for fiscal 22, about 97% electronically filed returns. That is critically important. One thing Congress can do to help us is to have people continue to file returns electronically, accurate returns, and when I say accurate, I'm talking about the advanced child tax credit and the EIP payments, because the returns that are not accurate fall out and end up needing a manual processing. From last filing season, we had more than 10 million returns in the return recovery rebate context, 13.2 million returns where people had reported something to do with their unemployment insurance, and as you know, the legislation changed during filing season to exclude $10,200 of unemployment compensation. We were already processing returns, so we got 10 million on return recovery rebate, we got 13 million on unemployment compensation, and we got millions with respect to the earned income tax credit, and as you know, Congress changed the law so that individuals could use their 2019s instead of 2020.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rettig. I know that there will be much more content to be discussed with all our questions. And so at this time, I will open the hearing for questions. Without objection, each member will be recognized for 5 minutes to question our witness. As mentioned earlier, we will not observe the Gibbons rule in this hybrid setting and will instead go in order of seniority for questioning, alternating between the majority and minority, beginning with members of the Oversight Subcommittee. Members appearing virtually are reminded to unmute yourselves when you are recognized for your 5 minutes. I will begin by recognizing myself for questions. Mr. Rettig, the IRS has announced the use of surge teams to address the tens of millions of returns in the backlog. In a sentence or two, can you tell me when will the backlog be eliminated? Before December?
My term ends in November, absolutely before December. And with all due respect, I would just add that my clock up here showed that I had 1:04. I didn't mean for you to have to gavel. I was watching my clock. But yes, we have 800 members of a search team, which are experienced IRS employees who've come on to accounts management. We have 700 coming into submission processing. As of today, barring any unforeseen circumstances, COVID, et cetera, but if the world stays as it is today, we will be what we call healthy by the end of calendar year 22 and enter the 23 filing season with normal inventories. Healthy is through the eyes of the taxpayer.
Thank you. That is very, very encouraging news to hear that definitive statement that the backlog will be cleared this year. Commissioner Rettig, I'm also pleased that both OPM and Congress have recognized the urgency of IRS hiring needs in order to address this historic backlog and to ensure that taxpayer returns are processed in a timely manner, and, in fact, provided the agency with direct hiring authority. But I'm concerned that we're not making the most of this opportunity due to employee retention challenges, particularly in key roles like returns processing. A GAO report published last month found that in the last fiscal year, not only did the IRS struggle to meet its hiring surge goals for returns processing, but these employees had an attrition rate of 17%, more than double the agency average. Can you talk about what the agency is doing to improve retention and attrition rates to maximize the effectiveness of the direct hiring surge?
For more than 2 years, we've been requesting direct hiring authority because we compete with the private sector who can bring somebody on board the next week. And for us, it's been a 6 to 8 month process. And when you get into the submission processing and accounts management, those people have a lot of options. They have Amazon, they have Walmart, they have the rest. Walmart announced last night they're hiring 50,000 people. Target announced it's onboarding at $20 an hour. Up until the president's recent executive order, we were at $14.57. I can only encourage people so much to come on board for the good of the country. At those levels, the difference between $15 and $20 is whether or not they're going to have a lunch or a dinner and what it's going to be. So we need assistance. We need to provide whatever. What we're doing is we have tuition reimbursement, we have child care credits, we've got a whole host of things that we worked with our union, National Treasury Employee Union, and I would not even go out on the limb and say that we are close. I have regular conversations with the president of the union. We have done that since I've been on board. We have a great working relationship, and as I've said to Tony Reardon, who's the president, your members are our employees. I want our employees to be here today during 22. I want them to be here during 23 as well. The employees are the strength of the agency. Everything else is important, but the employees and their pride and privilege are very important. And
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'd also like to discuss the issue of audit fairness, especially in the context of a tax gap as high as $1 trillion a year. A recent report from Syracuse University found that in the last fiscal year, the IRS audited low-income wage earners with less than $25,000 in total gross receipts at a rate 5 times higher than for everyone else. These taxpayers are less likely to have professional tax advice and more likely to face barriers like limited English proficiency. So even a correspondence audit presents a major burden. Not only are these audits unfair, but they are ineffective, yielding little revenue. How is the IRS using this hiring surge to address its capacity to audit complex returns of high earners? And what steps are you taking in this tax year to ensure that the most vulnerable taxpayers are not bearing the brunt of tax enforcement just to keep overall audit numbers steady?
let me first address that report and draw your attention to our data book, 2020 data book, page 33, table 17. I would also draw your attention to our 2019 data book, page 34. This for 2020, it's page 33. For 2019, it's page 34. For 2020, it's table 17. For 2019, it's table 17A. That report by Syracuse University is absolutely 100% false, and I'm tired of having to deal with this issue. We audit high-income taxpayers more than any other category of the Internal Revenue Service. Taxpayers reflecting over $10 million of income are audited at a rate exceeding 7%. Taxpayers at the $25,000 level, which is primarily the earned income taxpayer, would be the only people we would look at, are audited at 1.1%. Those are correspondence audits. get rid of APIRA so that we don't have to file improper payment rates, because we are forced to look at low-income taxpayers. What's the improper payment rate in the Earned Income Tax Credit real world? We must audit a percentage of those so that our research folks can come up with what the improper payment rate is. There's a 25% error rate in Earned Income Tax Credit. It's over $17 billion each year. The Secretary signs off on that. But in the high income, if you drop between 5 and 10 million, you're going to see a 4.2% rate. If you drop between $1 million and 5 million, you'll see a 2.2%. Between $1 million and 200,000, it drops off considerably, because in that range, we have information reporting. Under $1 million or around $1 million are the executives who have W-2s, who have 1099s. When you get over $1 million, you run into entrepreneurs who have pass-through entities and such. We are putting every experienced agent on the most complex tax returns. But to give you one example, and Chairman Chu, you've heard me say it before, and Ranking Member, last year we received 4.2 million partnership returns, which are flow-through returns. Many of those are complex, multi-tier. They involve foreign blockers, an entity that comes into a chain of entities to essentially block certain tax effects. 4.2 million. I have 6,500 experienced frontline revenue agents. These are our most capable technical people. They are entirely devoted to higher income taxpayer, to abusive transactions. We are putting every effort on that. I do not believe that people ought to be able to game the system. You've heard me say before, we are outgunned. The hiring authorities are needed. You also may have seen recently our IRS Chief Counsel announced looking for 200 experienced tax attorneys. I'm pleased to say that we put out that announcement and we received multiples of that from folks who are coming on board. We are not only going to bring them in counsel, but in other areas of the Internal Revenue Service.
Thank you
I could go on, but...
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, it is fairness that is the issue, and I heard the statistics, but I certainly hope that you keep that.
We need to change the Earned Income Tax Credit to a family law credit. We do not have the ability to determine from a filed return what a qualifying child is, but we need to issue those refunds immediately. We do so. 95% of the EITC refunds, it's a refundable credit, go out by April 15. And that's important. That's important money for important people who tend to get lost in society.
Thank you for that. Now I would like to recognize Mr. Rice for 5 minutes to ask his questions.
Mr. Commissioner, I hadn't planned on asking this question, but you've piqued my interest. What single factor, and I don't have but 5 minutes, so I have to keep it really short on your answers. What single factor would help the most in solving this 25% fraud rate on the Earned Income Tax Credit?
The hurdle is the definition of a qualifying child that's in the Earned Income Tax Credit. And what Chuck Rettig, not Commissioner, Chuck Rettig would propose from what I've seen since I came on board. I will call out Diane Grant behind me, has been working the issue since 1975. That put me on my heels when I came on board. But a family law credit, a family credit, merge all these credits into something that an agency can administer without getting into somebody's life.
What about income verification?
For the Earned Income Tax Credit, we actually don't try to verify the income. We try to verify it's a qualifying child. Okay,
I'm going to go back to my questions since I have such limited time. I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm glad that the IRS and the Biden Treasury Department have now put out a plan to resolve the backlog, and I am very pleasantly surprised that you say it can be done this year. I would have thought it would have taken longer than that. Why did it take so long to come up with a plan?
It didn't. We've had this plan since we entered the pandemic. Obviously, there was no pandemic playbook. That in July of 2020, we had over 23 million pieces of unopened mail. We have the capability, the staffing, to open between 1 and 1.5 million pieces of mail a year, if you do, a week, excuse me. If you do the math, 1 to 1.5 million a week, 23 million backlog. We needed to fight through the backlog. We did not have direct hiring authority, which meant to onboard people making $14, $15 an hour was a 6 to 8 month process.
So just real briefly,
paper returns.
If you didn't have direct hiring authority, how did you do a hire? You didn't do the hiring yourself, right? Who did it?
Quite frankly, I have not given a presentation without telling people we're hiring, and I'll meet them in the hallway and bring them down to IRS. Every IRS employee, we refer to as an IRS ambassador. Every IRS employee is a recruiter. We actually have a referral payment system where employees who bring
But before you had direct payment authority, who did your hiring, or direct hiring authority, excuse me, who did your hiring for you?
We only got direct hiring authority 2 days ago. And so we have a human capital office.
Before that, who did your hiring for you?
Human capital office. But remember, from 2000.
And how long did it take? And they're a federal agency, right? A federal
It's
bureaucracy?
an IRS
Okay.
function.
Okay. And how long did it take before you had direct payment authority, hiring authority to get somebody on board?
That's 8 months. The best example I can give you, we spent 3 months looking for 5,000 people in submission processing.
And how
We
long?
got
How long?
211.
8 months before. How long will it take with
30
direct?
to 45 days, we should be able to onboard. And then
Thank you.
train.
Thank you. Now, as we've discussed here in this hearing and hearing before and for 5 years now, and in privately yesterday, I think the real long-term solution to most of these problems is to modernize the information technology at the IRS. And I believe that everybody, Republicans and Democrats, want to see that done. I think that there's a hurdle, though, that the IRS has got to overcome because we feel like we have funded this before and hadn't seen the results. So I think that the hurdle the IRS has to jump is convincing us, and maybe it's mostly or maybe even all Republicans, I don't know, that if we throw money at the problem, that A, it will increase efficiency, and B, that the IRS can actually pull it off, because we feel like we've done it before and it didn't get pulled off. So, Mr. Commissioner, can we work on establishing, maybe with outside experts, a credible plan and how much it'll cost, when it can happen, and give us some confidence that it will actually occur?
I'd call your attention to the fact that this is the agency that distributed $1.5 trillion. We went at risk 3 times, 3 different EIP payments in record time, 2 weeks, 48 hours, and 24 hours. And I would also call your attention to our business systems modernization plan that we provided April 16, 2019. That plan was reviewed by McKinsey before we provided it, and we adjusted based on some comments and consultation with McKinsey. And as I've indicated, I think every time I've been up here, myself and the agency, we welcome oversight. Oversight is an important part of tax administration, important part of the IRS operations. And I think that not only myself, but anybody who follows in my place would welcome the opportunities to work with you. We take all ideas from all sources. At the end of the day, I said in a different hearing recently, I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat. California has an undeclared, but I am an American. I'm a very proud American. You're all proud Americans. Help us help others. That's been my entire time. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes Ms. Plaskett for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. And thank you, Mr. Rettig, for your service and for your willingness to come in this very busy time that the IRS has to speak with us. I wanted to ask a couple of questions, and I'm grateful to my colleagues who have discussed the backlog and some of the other issues. One issue that is a little more closer to home for me, just want to share with you. In 2004, I decided to move to the Virgin Islands, which is where my ancestral family is from. I was born and raised in New York City and was living in Washington when I moved there. And part of the reason I was able to move is that the Virgin Islands has a specific tax incentive program that brings businesses and industries to the territory that has really helped us to reverse our brain drain. When I moved back home, so many people in my same age bracket and professional experiences were moving to the territory, bringing with them their expertise in law, accounting, engineers, architects, etc. We're all coming back home and doing great work. Unfortunately, there were several individuals who Treasury and Congress felt were abusing that tax incentive program, and so rightly, Congress looked at it and some changes were made. I believe that there was overcorrection that was done. And one of those has been in the area of residency. Now, I know individuals at the IRS have said that they're willing to meet with us and have discussions with us about that, but this is a long time since the American Jobs Act was made and nothing has been done. I want to understand how we are going to correct this residency issue. If I live in the Virgin Islands, I can only be considered a Virgin Islands resident for tax purposes if I live there 183 days. Everywhere else in the United States, it's 122. If I move to Connecticut, I'm considered a resident there for tax purposes after 122 days that I have to remain there. But being in the Virgin Islands, it creates a higher bar, which also bars individuals who can really support our economy to be able to reside there. No one in this global economy lives anywhere if they are doing real business for 183 days, except during the pandemic when we were all forced to be at home with our husbands and wives and children and dogs. So I want to know what support you may be able to provide, and is the IRS looking at this?
I would suggest that we meet. I'm very familiar with Virgin Islands residency issues, and I'm also familiar with California and U.S. residency issues. California is 183 days. There's a presumption if you've been in California more than 9 months. And but also on the federal side, you have the 3-year rolling average. Maybe working out some kind of thing with that. But ultimately, I have to say, I'm a tax administrator. Treasury does policy. And
well, you do have the ability through Treasury, because you're the implementers, to influence how Treasury is going to enact this and have discussions with them.
You talk to the people at Treasury?
I have had talk discussions. Have you talked to Treasury about this?
Yeah, I don't have the ability to
influence
Treasury, but I
think you do, because you're the implementer of this, and you're the ones who trigger whether there are going to be audits of individuals with this. This is not a laughing matter. We have really lost a lot of economic development, a lot of tax base because of this rule.
I am very familiar, and I have offered to sit with you at any time. After this hearing, I'll make the afternoon available, I'll cancel meetings, I'll bring in our people, but we don't influence Treasury on tax policy. That is the exclusive arena of Treasury. We are a tax administrative agency that follows the law. You will get my, as I think I said here, non-commissioner help, because I can make comments as a non-commissioner. I cannot make those comments as a commissioner. I think you do understand. I think everybody should be treated fairly, and at the core of any residency issue is the bona fides of the residency, and I'm familiar with people who abused that relationship. We have similar situations going on with respect to Puerto Rico. We have similar situations between states. Coming from California, like Chairwoman Chu, she's thoroughly familiar with people who argue that they live in Las Vegas, some non-tax state. So I'm familiar with the residency issues. I'd be more than willing to sit with you and give you my 36-year private practice experience and maybe an approach, but the approach ultimately has to be Treasury. I don't have that.
I understand who has authority over it, and I would pose to you that you do have more influence than you think. But thank you very much, and I'll take you up on the offer to sit down.
Anytime.
Thank you.
I think you have my cell phone. So
thanks.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes Mr. Murphy for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner Rettig, for coming out today. It's obvious that this is a Herculean effort to get a handle over during the pandemic, but obviously some factors that have occurred long before the pandemic, some systemic inefficiencies and bureaucracies that have handcuffed not only you, but the American people in dealing with this so much. The IRS obviously is a point of great stress for the American people. No one likes to deal with the IRS. I'll just ask a few questions just because of the difficulty that we have now in getting hold of this. Do you guys ever use an outside agency to ever come in and, everybody's asking for money, money, money to do these things. Does anybody ever come in and try to give the IRS a lesson in efficiency, to try to do more with what you have?
Treasury and the IRS have contracts with quite a few consultants on the outside who do exactly that. I have made visits at various parts around the country trying to encourage others to participate with us, as I did on behalf of the country. I think that the high-end tech companies, for example, in California, could do better contributing. We have a lot of different abilities. I came on board to make things better. These tech companies got their big, powerful posture because they are raised in a country that has a rule of law they can rely upon. I think it's every American's duty, quite frankly, to help support the agency that's accountable for 96% of the gross revenue and touches more Americans than anyone on the planet.
Right, it does. Without a doubt it does, but as most Americans believe that less government is better, this is just the perfect example that we don't need more and more government because of the bureaucracy and inefficiency that we have. Let me ask a question. For all of the outstanding taxpayer filings that have been made, these are monies that have been paid to the government but have not been either refunded or filed. Do you have an estimate of how much the United States government owes the American people because of filings that have not been dealt with?
I do not. We'd have to try to figure how to get that. I can tell you that the inventories are down significantly. I know that most of you have staff who participate in the every Friday 2 p.m.
So if we have 10 million filings that have not been done, the average filing is how much? The average refund, rather, is how much?
Currently, it's running around 3,400.
So that when we're
those
talking,
would not all be refund returns. That would be
right, but the average
processing.
one. The average one. So we have hundreds of millions of dollars that are owed to the American taxpayers that are sitting in government coffers that are owed to those people. So
know that the majority of those are ones that fall out in the system. The inability of folks to reconcile two economic impact payments. The change in the law for EITCs that allowed 2019 instead of 2020. We had to manually look at more than 30 million returns, and that was under 5,000 people to do that. But in terms of technology and what we've been doing during the pandemic, there are many, but I'll give you one. We did what's known as fix-ers, and your staff are aware of this. Fix-ers took a position and automated the processing of the return recovery rebate, and through February 28, processed 4.2 million of 10.3 million that fell out, and that's operating at a very fast pace. So we have to balance in-person phones and other types of services with technology, but we are trending to the point of the chairwoman and the ranking member. We are trending in a really good direction.
Let me ask this then. What percentage of your workers are back in place, in person working?
We were never in, like the rest of the world, we have a blend between telework and in-person.
No, but what percentage are back in place today?
Percentage of people who are required to be back in the office are all back in the office. And the processing folks were back in the office in June of 2020, socially distanced, multiple shifts, mandatory overtime, as well as voluntary overtime throughout the workforce in accounts management and submission processing.
Okay, thank you. I do know that this is a difficult job. I'm not saying it's not at all.
I appreciate what you're doing.
I truly do, but I do think, just as with anything, we can do a lot better. The IRS had to pay out, a tremendous amount of money in interest because of the delays in processing. Without a doubt, that was money that should never have had to be spent by the American taxpayer. So I appreciate the work that you do. I hope that your retirement is a good one, and hopefully your replacement will come in and be even more efficient and a better steward of our taxpayer dollars. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes Mr. Doggett for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony this morning. I am very pleased that you responded favorably to the request made by Chair Pascrell, myself, and some senators to keep open the Austin Submission Processing Center, one of just 3 IRS facilities across the country that process these paper returns. We're all familiar with the comment of the National Taxpayer Advocate that paper is the IRS's kryptonite. And I know that our Austin IRS employees are working hard to handle it. Is in keeping, replacing, and hiring new staff because
Lloyd, your audio is cutting out.
Hey, I'm sorry. Thank you. concerned that there wouldn't be a facility there. I hope you'll continue to affirm your commitment to the Austin facility and its dedicated team so that we have the job done. So many problems that I believe we face today with the Internal Revenue Service are the result of previous budget decisions designed deliberately to ensure that the IRS fails, that the public would grow dissatisfied, frustrated, angry with the IRS, and eventually replace it with a less progressive system. Over the last decade, as you know, funding went down 20%, staffing went down 17%, but the number of returns that you're expected to process went up by 19%. The result are the very unprocessed returns that my Republican colleague was just talking about, unanswered calls, and general unhappiness with the IRS. Now some other Republican colleagues have come up with a 11-point plan to rescue America by slashing your funding in half and further reducing your
Mr. Doggett, your sound is off.
Sorry, let me just repeat the question. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The question is, if your budget were cut by 50%, as has been proposed by some of my Republican colleagues, what impact would it have on your ability to answer calls, get refunds back, and generally conduct and fulfill your lawful responsibilities?
If the IRS budget was cut by 50%, you might be better off and save more money by just shutting it down completely. We account for 96% of the gross revenue of the United States of America. How are you going to fund what we need to fund and what every American deserves? Efficiency, yes, but cutting our budget is not the right answer. Sorry.
Perhaps shutting it down is exactly what those who make this outrageous proposal have in mind. Let me ask you also.
By the way, sir, I'm not proposing to shut it down. I'm just responding to the question.
I understand. Some other people would like to, and in fact, their budget decisions over the last decade have been designed to shut it down slowly, now abruptly. Let me ask you about your comments earlier about the tax gap. You've estimated that the difference between taxes owed and taxes actually paid, I believe, were an astounding $1 trillion per year. Another estimate is that 70% of that gap is with the top 1%. What resources do you need in order to close that tax gap?
We need a visible, robust enforcement mechanism. We're down 17,000 enforcement personnel, and that doesn't mean everybody on the street. It means strategic. It means experienced people who know when to. You cannot complain that we conduct audits. You can complain if we conduct audits that go on too long or in certain arenas where we should be moving on, but we do not have the ability to do what we need to do. And I continue today to stand by the $1 trillion that we are about to issue our tax gap estimates for the period. That was 2011 to 13. We're going to do 14 to 16, and you're going to see them track. But I would like to draw your attention, because I assume there will be a lot of press, that you're going to see us project what we think the tax gap is for 2019. But know that last year there was over $14 trillion in transactions in virtual currency with a market cap over $2 trillion. Somewhere between 30 and 43% of that market is U.S. people, some indicia of U.S. reporting, and they need to report.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes Mr. Evans for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congress recently enacted appropriation legislation that would increase the IRS funding by nearly 6%. I understand this is nearly not enough to reverse more than a decade of severe underfunding, and I recognize that IRS needs more resources to update its antiquated technology. Still, Commissioner, how does the agency plan to use the increase in FY22 funding to improve service delivery, provide timely response to our constituents, particularly those who do not typically file a tax return, but who have earned benefits like the child tax credit and the EITC.
Note that it's a $675 million increase over enacted 21, but it's more than $500 million less than what Treasury and OMB requested for the Internal Revenue Service. And of that $600 million, over $300 million is cost of living adjustments. So if you net, it's about a $375 million adjustment for an agency that gets called upon time after time after time for new responsibilities and performs. Our people perform. Our people are spectacular. In terms of earned income tax credits or all refundable credits, child tax credit and numerous others, we need to educate people. We need to help people get it right. I am incredibly proud that during my term, I don't take credit for it, but being a public school kid from LA, I opened some eyes and doors about certain parts of the communities. And for the first time in the history of the IRS, I'm number 49 as commissioner. The Form 1040 is in a language other than English. It's in Spanish. And I'll accelerate through the languages. You may have noticed last week we announced we also launched Spanish Braille for our returns. And I will call out also that last year we had over 2 billion hits on irs.gov. More than 90 million were on our non-English speaking pages. We are in the communities in person. We're providing services. We have a whole array of taxpayer services. It's not just the phones, it's online, it's our taxpayer assistance centers. One of the first things I would encourage funding for from Congress is to let us staff up our 358 taxpayer assistance centers. That's our frontline retail, if you will, operation. We have 39 that are unstaffed that we write a circuit, we pull people in. Similarly, taxpayer advocate service, they got a little bump this year. That's the safety net for many taxpayers on the outside. And so to have them have a caseload that's 3 or 4 times normal, almost impossible for any individual to do, but they give their best. And you also know that we launched this year the Taxpayer Experience Office, which is to operate and look and get comments and questions through the eyes of the taxpayer. And if I can add one thing, we routinely hold hear me interactions with our frontline employees, whether it's on the phone or in the taxpayer assistance centers. What are you hearing in terms of filing, in terms of this and this? And you'll see, that's when you see us issue alerts, announcements, letters, reach out to Congress so that we can work with your local offices and whatnot to relay. We also interact with the transmitters because they run almost a mirrored operation to us during filing season. If you went in through an electronic transmitter, that's the person they tend to call. So we share information with them as well.
Commissioner, when constituents cannot reach the IRS and cannot get help from the Taxpayer Advocate Service, they contact their member of Congress. So your response to that aspect of
Absolutely. You know, the pandemic's been very difficult for all of you, for your folks on the front lines, and, you know, it has been difficult for us as well. I have almost never interacted with somebody at Congress, you know, 535 plus, who does not have my personal cell phone, who does not have the personal cell phone of our Deputy Commissioner for Operations Support. We are available. Taxpayer Advocate Service is available. Our legislative affairs folks are available. I will hold a one-on-one conversation with you or without you with your staff. I'll bring in Ken Corbin, who's our Taxpayer Experience Officer. And for constituents who are having difficulty wanting to know where their matter is, get us a waiver so we can talk to you, get us the taxpayers' information. I have been on calls where, you know, it opens up, there's 70, and Ken Corbin will go, well, 14 are here, this 13, we're waiting, we issued a response to them. So the idea when we talk about how many returns we have, it's not like they're sitting in a closet somewhere. We have 4 million returns, paper returns, to process. The rest of the inventory, if you will, are they've been kicked out for an error in the return, they've been kicked out for matching, identity theft. There's a whole host of reasons. Keeping in mind, we are the gatekeeper for fraud. We're the gatekeeper for cyber. We get over 1.6 billion cyber attacks per year with recent world events. You want us to be that gatekeeper. You want us to be ever vigilant, and you absolutely must fund us to keep those gates closed for the benefit of every American. We get hit, it's emotional.
I thank you, Madam Chair. Yield back to Councilman Dow.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes Ms. Miller for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Rice. And thank you, Mr. Rettig, for being here today. The IRS has struggled over the recent years, and the challenges from COVID-19 have only exacerbated the challenges that your agency is facing. And I appreciate the genuine efforts that you have made to try to rectify these issues, but many questions still remain on how the IRS continues to function. And I want to focus my questions today on the Employee Retention Tax Credit, which was an overwhelmingly popular emergency program to help small businesses and nonprofit organizations weather the storm of the pandemic and the government-mandated lockdowns. The ERTC was unfairly cut short for the fourth quarter of 2021, and many of the small businesses and nonprofits are still waiting on relief from the third, the second, and even the first quarter of last year, while processing delayed 8 to 10 months. When Congress authorized this program, it was designated to be emergency relief. Receiving the advance payment of this credit could mean life or death for small businesses and the nonprofits in every single congressional district. So, Mr. Rettig, with the IRS created successful processes to ensure individuals could receive these direct payments during the pandemic, explain why the IRS handles ERTC processing like a normal piece of correspondence, and that you do not have the procedure to prioritize these credits.
We do have procedures in place with that, but we did not have the ability to automate our systems. That's one of the differences, to automate our systems in order to process it. But I would encourage that we arrange a meeting or a call with your staff and with the folks who are there.
Well, I do not have your personal phone number, by the way. Make sure I get it.
Yeah. I was going to say it, but then I'm thinking,
I don't
okay,
think you better.
probably not my best move. Although it's
No.
my IRS phone, it'll only be there for
Can you
November.
commit to the committee today that the IRS prioritize the ERTC processing, including creating a dedicated mailbox, phone line, and updated timelines as to when to expect these refunds, specifically for the small businesses and nonprofits who are attempting to claim the credit?
I come from a small business environment, both personally and my dad had a truck, and very committed to helping small business, all taxpayers, but small business taxpayers in many sense are the backbone of the country, right? They're the ones that we interact with, and they're often the ones that during the pandemic, I think most of these were not previous. They didn't have the challenges that the pandemic presented to them previously, and they had nowhere to turn to.
But you know, anytime any business opens its door, whether it's a truck, a glass door, or any, they are putting themselves at risk. They're taking a gamble by being in business. And the speculation that the ERTC was eliminated in Q4 2021 within the infrastructure bill because members of Congress did not think employers were taking advantage of the relief. Congress should not have couldn't have the accurate information due to the processing delays, again, at your agencies. Can you tell us how many claims the IRS processed from the previous quarter amendments before Q4 2021, and how many have been processed since?
You know, I don't have that with me, but I can get that for you this afternoon.
Great.
And I just want to be clear, the IRS is not the one that got rid of the Employee Retention Tax Credit. You know, it was Congress.
I know.
We follow the law.
I know that, and I thank you, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. And I also urge all my colleagues on the committee to co-sponsor my bipartisan bill to reinstate the ERTC for the fourth quarter of 2021. It's H.R. 6161, and it will deliver our promise to relief to the small businesses and nonprofits in your communities. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlelady's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes Mr. Horsford for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I appreciate this important, timely hearing. IRS Commissioner Rettig, good to see you. Thank you to you and all of your team members. Congratulations on 50 years of service to you as well. I'm going to get right into it. because we have a number of priorities facing the American people, and one of them is the issue of gas prices. They're simply too high, and it is imperative that we identify solutions to bring them down. Since President Putin started his devastating war in Ukraine, the price of gas has gone up 75 cents. But the price of oil is rising disproportionately compared to the cost of a barrel of oil. As gas prices soared in 2021, the largest oil and gas companies made a combined $205 billion in record profits, according to a new report by Accountable.us. ExxonMobil, the largest oil and gas company in the U.S., reported over $23 billion in profits in 2020 alone, which was a 60% increase compared to 2019 profit of $14 billion. This on top of the tax cut that they got under the Trump tax proposals. And 3 oil companies actually pay an effective federal tax rate of 0. At the same time, many of these big oil companies are not paying their fair share of taxes, as I said, and there are many not paying any at all, and they're not doing anything to pass those profits on to consumers at a time when the American people need it the most. This is simply not fair, and it's time that it be addressed. So, Mr. Rettig, what steps is and can the IRS take to provide relief to the American people as it pertains to accountability for these big oil companies and the price of gas at the pumps?
We will do all that we can for every American throughout. That predates me. That will continue for the employees of the IRS. We are not a brick and mortar organization. We will follow the law. I would encourage Congress to take a hard look at the law. And in conjunction with that, so I had heard something recently about, there was discussion about an excess profits tax and whatever. There's a lot of things that, the media is talking about in this space. But no, come back to, IRS has 6,500 experienced revenue agents, and I only gave you one lane, which was the partnership tax returns.
Yeah, thank you.
We do not have the resources to go after the bigs or the super bigs, as we refer to them. And we get outgunned routinely in that space.
Let me reclaim my time then on that point, because I also know, dealing with the earned income tax credit, the very low-income people get identified for auditing at a higher and disproportionate rate, and yet we don't have the adequate staffing we need to go after the big companies, and in this case, big oil, some of whom are not paying any federal tax, effective tax rate, and those who have record profits and are not passing those benefits to consumers. Does the IRS support providing an income-based tax relief to provide consumers with a monthly rebate paid for by the excess profits of big oil companies?
That would be a policy call for Treasury. Treasury handles tax policy. We follow the law.
I look forward to contacting Treasury to follow up on that. I want solutions now. We cannot wait. My constituents are struggling to get by as it is, and yes, we have a lot of priorities, but this is one that must be addressed.
I'm confident the Deputy Secretary will meet with you.
I hope he will, and I appreciate his leadership as well. Now, turning back to the tax filing season, as my colleagues have talked about, I have 2 just questions I want to get on the record. One, is there someone at IRS my staff can call with respect to the delays in the direct deposit issue that we're hearing about, and how is the department dividing up its resources to address the 2020 tax return backlog while also processing the incoming 2021 claims?
I think your staff has my cell phone, and our Ledge Affairs folks also, they can reach out direct to them, and then also we have Friday briefings every Friday, 2 p.m. with Ken Corbin, who can get the direct questions, direct responses for you on that. In terms of processing, we process on a first in, first out basis. We have a few million, about 2.5 million returns that were filed in calendar year 20, paper returns in calendar year 21. We have about 1 million, we have about 4.2 million total paper returns in inventory to be processed. Everything else is in process, is looked at, and has fallen out for some particular reason, but we can certainly go through it. I'm confident, if I may, Madam Chair, if any of you were in my seat, you would have the same passion and pride that I sit here with of the effort of our folks to get this right. We are working really hard on behalf of each of you and every American.
We appreciate that, and you can follow up in writing with all those details about how you're going to be processing these returns this year. The gentleman's time has expired, and the chair now recognizes Mr. Hearn for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Rettig, for being here today. It's great to see you again. I'd like to have some additional conversation around the ERTC issue that's going on across the country. A lot of companies, I was in small business 35 years, certainly understand the importance of, the relief that Congress gave, and unfortunately much of that relief didn't get to the businesses, but they had the exposure to the tax. And, they were struggling, and we've talked to accountants and companies about the issues facing the ERTC issue. The main issue companies are faced with now, though, is the amended quarterly federal tax return, the Form 941. Companies are filing their 941 on time and then filing the amended 941 because payroll companies don't have the bandwidth to get the information needed in time for the 941 filings. In these cases, companies will be filing their April 22 returns with reduced wages, but they still have not received the checks for the ERTC credit. Ultimately, what this means is taxpayers are paying tax on income they have never received. Not only are small businesses liable for the tax on reduced wages, but are also liable for the safe harbor on their estimated taxes, which is inflated due to the reduced wages. We've even heard shocking instances of companies having to go take out short-term loans to pay their quarterly estimates or their liability that's due until they receive their credits from the previous year, from 2021. Like my colleague, Ms. Miller, pointed out, this program was meant to provide emergency assistance to small businesses. This might seem like an innocent timing difference to the IRS, and I certainly understand your passion, but I can assure you that the small businesses are hurting and should not be penalized for doing the right thing. I understand there are massive backlogs at the IRS, and there are procedures in place to address these issues. But the small businesses who kept their doors open need certainty that they will receive the credits in a timely manner and need assurances they will not be penalized. We have reports of penalty notices going out automatically to taxpayers who filed on time but have returns stuck in the backlog. Groups like the AICPA have asked the IRS to consider penalty relief. And I guess my only question is, and I'll give you the remainder of the time to elaborate, are you considering this type of relief for taxpayers who didn't do anything wrong, specifically as it relates to ERTC?
Specifically and generally, that would consider penalty relief. I've said to everybody here, every time I go outside, and I do a lot of external presentations, I'm 36 years a tax lawyer on the outside representing taxpayers mostly with respect to the IRS and various state taxing agencies. And what I tell the accountants and the lawyers in the world, any conversation I would have with an IRS person going back to February of 2020 would start out with COVID, and it would be COVID in the middle. Our employees have gone through the same thing. Our employees understand. The point on the automated notices, those were stopped. So if somebody has received one recently, I would like to have that notice and find out, because all automated notices stopped months ago. And so we have addressed virtually everything. Nothing is off the table for us to consider. We have regular meetings with people all over, and I think you've heard me say, I know thousands of people on the outside who fortunately or unfortunately have my non-IRS personal cell phone that I had before.
Would you want to share that? No, I'm
Yeah, really. And by the way, Ms. Miller, thank you for protecting me from myself, right? But the point being, our ear is to the ground on the front lines in every direction. Internally, you heard me talk about how we're touching our people who are handling the calls, and that's getting to me. Externally, my friends are the people that you're talking about who are on the outside, whether it's small business owners, accountants, enrolled agents, people without a designation or people with a designation. So the understanding is there, the need for the priority and the understanding the need for a priority. I do not anticipate people ending up with a penalty when we had automated that they have to pay.
Mr. Rettig, if I could reclaim my time, we have about a minute left. But I just, to the specifics, because there are a lot of preparers that are watching this video. We're going to make sure that they see this. And I'm not trying to put, well, I guess I am trying to put you on the spot. You've been in the business. You've been on the other side representing businesses. All they're asking for is not to be penalized in the liability and the estimates on money they haven't received yet. Now, they understand if they receive the money, it's not they're asking for anything special other than not to be penalized for money they haven't received yet.
You know, the people that provide the letters and that lobby you hard know the answers to the questions they have you ask me.
Oh, listen, sir.
The answer to that is yes.
Sir, there's no letters come to my office. This is people I talk to. I've been in business 35 years. I mean, I've multiple businesses. So this is a personal thing. It should be for everybody.
I'm speaking, when you mentioned AICPA and others,
Okay, yeah.
that's what I'm speaking to.
Okay.
And I'm talking to the same people you're talking to. They're not my professional colleagues. They're my friends. These are your friends.
Sure.
Your business. We're all in the same thing. IRS is an agency of people who understand, who've gone through the same thing people on the outside have gone through.
Mr. Rettig, with all due respect, you're not answering the question. Just some consideration, and it's got to get out quickly because we're at the end of the quarter now. So I yield back, Madam Chair.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Davis for 5 minutes. Mr. Davis? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. And Commissioner, let me thank you for being here and answering all of this plethora of questions that are coming. But first of all, let me thank you for your letter yesterday clarifying that state chafee payments to foster youth are non-taxable. Well, it's not showing mute.
Yes, and I apologize that I thought that went out to you previously, and you and I have had discussions in that space before, and the letter was to confirm those discussions. But thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I also want to thank you and your team for creating materials to help foster and homeless youth understand the earned income tax credit provisions are relevant to them. And further, I want to thank the Chicago taxpayer advocate, Andrew Van Single, and Congressional District Liaison, Susie Gaines, for their help educating my constituents about the refundable tax credits. Mr. Commissioner, I know how life-changing the tax year 21 enhancements to the refundable credits will be to my constituents this year. And so for each of the refundable credits, can your team provide myself and this committee interim reports on the number of claimants and the amount of funds for tax year 2021 for the refundable tax credits soon after the filing season closes? This information will be of great help to understand how these credits impacted families and workers. Could that information be provided to us?
Yes, sir. I actually have that information for you today. That we don't keep the information directly, but we do, under the PATH Act, we are required to hold those until February 15. So the information I have today is on the refundable credits that we had held as of February 15, but have since released. There's 3 basic categories. There's held only for earned income tax credit. There's held only for the child tax credit, and there's held for both child tax credit and earned income tax credit. So in total, $34 billion was held through February 15 in accordance with the PATH Act. We're not able to distribute that until after February 15. EITC only hold was $2.3 billion. ACTC only hold was $110 million. EITC and ACTC hold combined, so people who had claimed both credits, $26.7 billion. There's $5 billion of other credits, non-EITC, non-CTC. So those numbers were a total of $34 billion, $2.3 billion EITC, $110 million ACTC only, and a combined $26.7 billion for the combination of EITC and the rest. We have the specifics. I kind of rounded off. But.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And again, I just want to shout out and say thanks to the Taxpayer Advocate's Office in Chicago for all of the assistance that they have given, trying to make sure that individuals understand the Earned Income Tax Credit, that they understand the Child Tax Credit, and understand all of those benefits which are due them and helping to spread the word. So thank you very much, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I would like to thank our witness, Commissioner Rettig, for joining us today. Please be advised that members have 2 weeks to submit written questions to be answered later in writing. Those questions and your answers will be made part of the formal hearing record. With that, the subcommittee stands adjourned.